are back with comedian Dave Boyle, and I'm quitting alcohol. So there's some shit going down at the moment that I think is worth explaining. The US economy, and therefore the entire world economy, is teetering on the brink of collapse. Like today. Not fucking in 10 years, like tomorrow morning's going to be very fucking interesting. So let me just explain what's going on. The US government sell these things called treasury bonds. You've probably heard of them, just treasuries or bonds, treasury bonds, that's what they call them. Long-term treasury bonds, it's all the same thing. They're just government bonds. And so basically what the US government does to fund their spending is sell these bonds. And these bonds come with a interest, just like a savings account at the bank. Economists call it a yield, but it's just, the concept is exactly the same as an interest rate at the bank. All the economist jargon is just dog shit. You give the US government or the bank $1 million and they say, we'll hold on to that for 20 years and we'll give you 4% per year for 20 years and we'll give you the $1 million back as well. So generally it's other countries who buy US treasury bonds. So China would buy $50 billion worth of US treasury bonds at like 2%, whatever the going interest rate is. And then the US uses that money to fund the government and the deficits and whatever. So you're with me? It's very simple. Countries give the US money. They buy treasury bonds off the US, and the US give them an interest rate, which they call yield, for the money. It's basically a loan. And there's usually a duration. There's like 10-year treasury bonds, 20-year treasury bonds, and 30-year treasury bonds. Okay, you've got that very simple concept. So for the last, let's say 70 years, 60, 70 years, the US Treasury bond has been considered the world's most trusted, most solid asset. More than gold, more than silver, more than anything. So in a crisis, when the stock market is crashing, sovereign states and banks and hedge funds and whoever, the big money for safety goes into treasury bonds. They take their money out of the crashing stock market and put them in the safe asset, the safe haven, which has been for the last 70 years, US treasury bonds. And they just put their money in, the US gives them a interest rate, and it's safe. In desperate times, they're still earning a little bit of money on that interest. And that has been the play for 70 years. In a crisis, treasury bonds. Now, when these emergencies or crises occur, everyone in the world wants to go buy treasury bonds. So there is a massive appetite for these US treasury bonds, which give the US the opportunity to lower the interest rate. So in a crisis situation or emergency or a downturn, whatever, there's so many buyers that the US can take their interest rate from like 3% to 2% to 1.5% because there's so many fucking buyers. And that's what has happened for the last 70 years. US Treasury bonds are the safest, most valuable asset in the world. When there's a downturn, everyone goes to US Treasury bonds. That demand for Treasury bonds gives the US the opportunity to lower the interest rate on those bonds. Now, what happened today, or what is going on currently, is the stock market of just about every single country in the world is crashing, including the US's, and nobody is buying the US Treasury bonds. And today, the US Treasury bond interest rate actually went up 1%. It spiked. It was a massive spike. So for almost the first time in living memory, there's an economic downturn and nobody is turning to US Treasury bonds. Now, this has big implications because one of the reasons, well, not the Trump administration, but people around the Trump administration, or a lot of the talk has been that Trump is causing this chaos. He's doing the tariff thing to bring down the interest rates of the Treasury bonds because sometime this year, the US has to refinance about $9 to $11 trillion worth of debt. Now, if they did that at the current interest rate, which is high because they've just been raising interest rates for the last 2 years, the US would go into some serious fucking crazy debt and the repayments on that debt would go out of control. So what the people around the Trump administration have been saying is the chaos is, like I said yesterday, 4D chess. He's playing 4D chess because he's trying to crash the economy to bring the interest rates of the treasuries down so they can refinance the debt at a better interest rate. But that hasn't quite happened. And what has happened is the economy and the stock market is crashing. And not only is it crashing, interest rates are going up. No one trusts the US government treasury bonds anymore. Other nations and big money have lost faith in the treasury bonds and therefore the USA, and it is not looking fucking good. No one actually knows what happens now because it really has never happened. It's never happened. There has always been buyers for treasury bonds, but there isn't now. And not only that, China and other countries are selling their treasury bonds, which also forces the interest rate up. So when other countries are selling their treasury bonds, they're selling it at a discount. So the US government has to raise their interest rate, which means they'll be paying the country back more money than they would otherwise. But they have to raise the interest rate so people actually buy them because no one's buying them at 4%. So they spiked to 4.5. They were down last week to like 3.3 or something interest rate percent. And it spiked up to 4.5 last I saw. And the 30-year treasury bond was 5%. Now, this is like a double disaster for the Trump administration because it means they've got a collapsing stock market and economy, and they've got a failing bond market, which it basically means only two things can happen here. Either the Federal Reserve, comes in and starts buying US treasuries off the US government. Basically, it's quantitative easing. It's fraud. It's basically fraud. It's been fraud the whole fucking time. So the Fed has to come in and start buying treasuries and also dumping interest rates, basically they need to print money, and not just a little bit of money, fucking trillions. Like this is a big one. So there's that. That's the one option. They have to come in and print mega trillions. I think they'd have to print like 50 to 100 trillion or something. Not all at once, but over the next like 2 years, just to protect the economy, just to postpone a full-on economic collapse. And the other option is to let the treasury market fail, and it could cause a contagion that collapses the entire US economy and therefore the world economy, and God knows what happens. Well, the US market opens in about an hour and a half, and I won't be awake, but it could be fucking wild. Now, the other implication of this is countries are no longer buying US treasuries, but they still have to put their money into something. You have to put your money into something to protect the value of that money. Now, China, I think last week, bought 13,000 tons of gold. So China's going all in on gold, it seems. India's gold, Russia's gold as well. Now, all these countries that are enemies of the US are buying gold because you need this neutral reserve asset, because no other country trusts any other country enough to buy their bonds and believe they're not going to fucking just print money and devalue these bonds. People believed the US wouldn't do it, but they've done it for the last 30, 40 years. I don't know how the systems last this long anyway. But these countries are buying gold, and the US is they're going to have two choices, because they will have to move to a neutral reserve asset as well. And it's either going to be gold or it's going to be Bitcoin. And I just don't see, especially with all the people surrounding fucking Donald Trump, I just don't see them pushing up the price of gold by fucking pouring money into it and making China and everyone richer. So I can only imagine the only real move the US is going to have is to move into Bitcoin bonds or something like that. I know it sounds wild, but it's wild times. I really want to stay up and find out what happens in the morning. But that's a quick overview. That's a real quick overview. There's like a lot of complexity to it as well. It might not just be China selling off their treasury bonds. It could be a big bank in Japan or something has collapsed and they've sold their treasury assets, and that's why the yields have spiked, or the interest rates on the bonds have spiked, gone up. It's hard to tell how much jargon I'm using now as well. But let's see how it goes in the morning. It's interesting times. I hope that was informative. I'm going to fucking go to bed. That'll do for tonight, and I'll see you the fuck later.